First and foremost, I hope y'all are ready because we're about to have some fun. It's the best damn Rockets podcast that ever existed. Let's get it. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to State of the Rockets. My name is Roosh Williams. I am, if you want to follow me on Twitter, it's right there. I talk NBA, I talk Rockets all day on Twitter and other things as well, every now and then. I'm the host of the Noble and Roosh Show, which is a podcast you can get anywhere that you hear your podcast. It's hosted by Ball is Life. I talk about all NBA things, and me and my other co-host, Zach Noble, interview NBA players, beat writers, all that good stuff. So give that a follow. But my partner.
My name is Jackson Gatlin, and you can follow me on Twitter at JT Gatlin. That's where I do all of my damage, be it Rockets coverage, NBA coverage. I host the Locked on Rockets podcast. It's 5 days a week worth of Rockets coverage, Monday through Friday. Also do the Locked on NBA podcast every single Monday, and I'm the founder of ClutchCityControlRoom.com. You can be sure to check us out for tons of Rockets content there. But we, Roosh and myself, are here as part of State of the Rockets, a brand new Rockets podcast, taking a deep dive on all things Houston Rockets.
And you can get this podcast on Spotify, Apple, and YouTube at the moment. And look, if you follow Locked on Rockets, amazing podcast, by the way. You already know Jackson's formula, but here what we're going to do is we're just going to let it rip, unfiltered, raw, Rockets talk to the bone. That's how we're going to get down, and we're going to have some fun doing it. Today, we're going to be talking about some John Wall news that broke. We're going to be talking about none other than the team point guard, Kevin Porter Jr.
Is he really a point guard, though?
Oh,
I'm gonna play a little devil's advocate right here, right at the top.
And then we're gonna be talking about Jalen Green's amazing stretch of performances in games, and we're gonna cap it off by getting to some listener questions. If you hit us up on Twitter, there's a good chance we answered your question. We answered I think half of them. So let's get right into it. Jackson, John Wall news. Hit me with it.
All right, so John Wall news here, reported by Michael Scotto of USA Today. Rockets point guard John Wall exercising his $47.4 million player option as expected. I mean, nobody's going to turn down $47 million. I certainly wouldn't. But there's a possibility that the Lakers and Rockets may revisit the previous discussions in a John Wall for Russell Westbrook swap this offseason. And if those trade talks are don't actually go anywhere, the Rockets may actually be inclined to visit into buyout discussions with John Wall and his camp and trying to figure out what could actually take place there, because John Wall's healthy. He wants to play for a team that's actually fighting for some playoff positioning, wants to, play some winning basketball. And, frankly, I think this is kind of exactly where we expected this John Wall situation to go, right? Roosh, I didn't expect anything different. I didn't expect him to turn down the player option. That would have been an absolute 180. And
never a chance he was going to turn that option down. Yeah, this is what I expected. I think it's weird because I don't know if you saw it. I could have sworn I saw it. Maybe I'm wrong. But I saw something to the effect of, hey, the Rockets are going to try to trade John Wall. If they can't, then they expect buyout talks at some point to happen and to go on. And so I'm thinking that kind of removes the leverage from Houston, right? If everyone knows you're going to buy John Wall out, if you can't trade him, then why would they trade for him, right? Especially if you're a contender. Or if you're a team looking to get over the hump, you can maybe wait it out until it's time for that buyout to happen. So, it'd be interesting if John Wall is just on the Rockets again and they sit him for 40-something million. I'm not sure if that's going to happen. I have no idea. I'm sure John Wall wants to get to a point where he can play, and I think he's still got some juice left in the tank. I tweeted on Twitter. That's a funny phrase. I tweeted on Twitter.
Some nice alliteration there. Good job.
Well, I tweeted on Twitter that the Peter so that a lineup of John Wall, Jalen Green, Kevin Porter Jr., Jalen at the 2 and Kevin at the 3, Alperen Şengün, I think I said, and I don't know, Christian Wood or Jabari Smith and Alperen Şengün would be interesting. And that would be an interesting lineup just for basketball purposes, not for tanking or whatever. It would just be kind of fun to see if that collection of talent can get anything done. But outside of that, I mean, who's going to trade for John Wall?
Well, it's so weird because I do think that I agree with you in the sense that, like, if they're kind of putting the word out there that they're planning to try and buy him out if they can't consummate a trade somehow, as Roosh chugs a just monstrous amount of water for all of our YouTube viewers. But I do think it's interesting that from the Lakers' perspective, right, they're in a very precarious spot as a franchise. And this is not state of the Lakers, so we're not going to dive into all of that. But I do think that they are faced with a really tall task of trying to reshape their image in the span of one offseason to be able to like maintain some semblance of competitiveness. And it really depends on how far they're willing to cave to like LeBron's will and like what he wants to do with the organization. And I do think that if the Rockets are in an advantageous enough position to be like, if LeBron comes knocking on the door and he's like, I want John Wall, if Clutch Sports is like, we want John Wall in LA, like I feel like they have the pieces to make that trade happen. It didn't happen this past trade deadline, the Wall for Westbrook swap, because Pelinka dug his feet in and didn't want to give up that 2027 first rounder from LA. That made a lot of sense. Now they're kind of in a position where they may be forced to have to do that. And if you're looking at it from the Rockets lens, if you can maybe squeeze an extra first round pick out of LA now that they can trade that 2029 first round pick, I believe it is, then maybe this is one of those situations where you think of it like two birds, one stone. You get rid of John Wall, you get back some assets from the Lakers who could be really, really juicy trade assets down the line. And you maybe find a potential suitor and a new home for Christian Wood in said deal as well. I don't know about you, Roosh, but an idea or a deal consisting of John Wall and Christian Wood out with Russell Westbrook coming back, and the Rockets pick up a couple juicy late first round draft picks from the LA Lakers, who we don't even know what that team's going to look like down in 2027, 2029. That could be a really great haul for the Houston Rockets.
Well, funny you say that. I saw another rumor today saying that the Charlotte Hornets might be interested in Russell Westbrook. So the reason I say it's funny is because another team that was interested in Christian Wood was also the Charlotte Hornets. So I don't know how the logistics of any such trade would work, but maybe there's a way to like finesse that, right? Russ to the Hornets, John Wall to the Lakers, Christian Wood somehow to the Hornets picks. I have no idea. That's not my bag. Play with the trade machine if you're listening and let me know if there's anything out there that's possible. But the interesting thing about that is that, well, first of all, I think it's important to note that rumors come out from anywhere, right? And a game you need to play is trying to source who leaked what rumor. And you can usually do that by kind of trying to track like what reporter is linked to what, the front office, the players side, the agents, whatever. And so the Charlotte news, right? It's like, who's leaking that? I don't know. The John Wall stuff, who reported that? I don't know, right? But the other thing to consider is that Russ's contract this season was tough to move because it was so expensive. And then he had another year on it. I think Russ will be more tradable as an expiring contract.
And so will John Wall by that same token.
That's true. You're right. So that's another thing to consider. There might be a team out there looking to dump salary and maybe the Rockets take, but that's the thing. The Rockets wouldn't want to take that salary back. The Lakers would. So, because if the Rockets are going to unload Wall, they want to keep that 2023 space as clean as possible, right? So they don't want to take contracts back. So I don't see that happening. But the Lakers, on the other hand, who need to win now and do everything they can to keep LeBron, or so you'd think, they might be willing to take someone back. So that's why I think that the Lakers will have more options than the John Wall swap, but we'll see.
Yeah, the John Wall situation, I'm not expecting anything to like materialize overnight about it. It's honestly one of those things where like you look up sometimes you're like, oh yeah, John Wall's still on the Rockets. Like when the Rockets played in Miami, like one of recent games, down the stretch, and it was like seeing him on the bench, like with the Rockets team in Miami, it was so like surreal. It was almost like an episode of like Black Mirror, and you're like, what the hell is happening right now? But that's not the point guard that we want to talk about right now, because there is a point guard that's actually on the team that has been under a lot of scrutiny throughout the entire season, let's face it, but especially as of late, and that is one Kevin Porter Jr., who apparently came under fire, after this most recent outing against the Brooklyn Nets, a game in which he had a season-high 36 points, but, finished with just 4 assists on the evening. Roosh, let's kind of try to unpack not just this game, but just Kevin Porter Jr. at large, his transformation, for lack of better terminology, as a player this season, kind of embracing that point guard role. I'll let you kind of set the table on your thoughts about Kevin Porter Jr. and kind of where your head is at regarding him as a player and as the point guard for this Houston Rockets team.
Yeah. So It sucks, right? Because he's actually the last, I forget the numbers. I think it's 32 or 33 games. He's been playing really well. Statistically, he's been playing very well. 16 and a half points, 6.5 dimes, 4.5 boards, something like that. I think like 44, 45% from the field, 39, 40% from three on high volume, turnovers under three per game. I think it was like 2.5. And that's what you want from Kevin Porter Jr. Now, I say it sucks because amidst that, right, some of us, including myself, I've done this as well, have not fully appreciated it because we've been focused on him playing point guard and whether or not he is the point guard of the future for the Houston Rockets. He wants to be the point guard for the Houston Rockets, which is important to note because the reason, at least for me, where I put emphasis on that distinction is because if he's not the point guard for the Rockets, then maybe he's the small forward for the Rockets. But if he doesn't want to be the small forward and he wants to be the point guard, and given how we've seen at certain times he seems difficult to approach on a variety of matters, it gives you some concern because it's like, well, if they want to switch him, is he going to accept that? How is that going to work? On the positive side, he's shown an ability to score the ball. He can score the shit out of the ball. He can score from all three levels. I'd like to see him get more contact when he drives, dip a shoulder, finish with the and one. Right now, he like finesses or tries to go around or over people, and sometimes it results in misses. His finishing at the rim has been down this season. It's been poor. I think maybe the last few games it's been better, but on the whole, it's been poor. And I'd like to see him operate from the mid range more because he can do it. He's a very capable mid range shooter. He's fallen in love with the three, but hey, he's shooting the three pretty well, about 37% on I think six something attempts per game. So that's been awesome to see. It's kind of Harden-esque in that regard because he's just like drilling threes, 4 of 10 on any given night, 6 of 14. He's had nights like that. It's kind of impressive. But that being said, I also see him pounding the ball and wasting shot clock and not running possessions, right? People point to assist numbers, both good and bad. People will point to his assist numbers and say 4 assists, that's not enough for a point guard. Or on the flip side, people will say, yo, he had 12 assists tonight. So like what? You don't think he's a point guard? And it's stupid because we get caught up with assist numbers. But the way he gets them, the way he processes the game, his basketball IQ, like all of that kind of stuff. When you see him comprehending and processing the game in real time, the reads he makes, like the way he manipulates the defense, it's not cerebral, it's not intentional. He's an instinct guy. He manipulates the defense by his excellent skill and moves and ball handling and footwork, which is great. But he doesn't manipulate the defense most of the time with his brain. And when I say point guard, people like make fun of me, like, "Oh, what you want, like some John Stockton?" No, I just want someone who's cerebral. Like Alonzo Ball is cerebral. He's not like a traditional point guard per se. He kind of is, but kind of isn't. But he's cerebral, right? Chris Paul is obviously like famous for how freaking smart he is and how he breaks the game down with the ball in his hands. A guy like Tyrese Halliburton, whatever. List goes on, right?
Can I pose a question to you then? Do
Yeah,
you view James Harden as cerebral then, and the way that he impacts the game and creates for others?
absolutely. I mean,
Okay.
do you not?
No, it's not that I don't. It's just that I because we do so much comparison of like, oh, well, KPJ is like, baby Harden, all this stuff, right? Comparing their two games. And I don't necessarily think that Harden was there at this earliest stage in his career. Like Harden didn't come into the league and have like this, wide array of like playmaking capability at his fingertips. He like developed and grew this over time. Now, that's not to say that, like, I don't want to go back and if I were to go back and like compare footage of like Harden at 21 years old to KPJ right now at 21, like I'm sure we're going to find some similarities in their game, but I don't think you're going to get the same Harden that you have right now at 21. Like he grew into that role. And one of the reasons that he grew into that role and was able to like leverage his high basketball IQ is because of the physical gifts and the skill set that he had on the floor, which is eerily similar to Kevin Porter Jr., which is why I still have that like level of optimism that even if he's not displaying that like innate ability to, forcibly create for others on offense, and he's more just doing things off of like reacting, right? Like he's reacting to what the defense gives him, be it either scoring the ball himself or creating for his teammates. And he's not actually influencing the game, putting his stamp on the game directly. I think that he's got the tools to develop that over time. And it isn't necessarily a skill that you either have or you don't have, basically, right? I think it's something that can be learned, if that makes sense.
So I agree with everything you're saying. The one thing I disagreed with, which is important, is the reactionary comment. He doesn't react to what the defense gives him. He just does his thing no matter what. And that's kind of the problem. Now, everything you said is right though. Can he become that? He can. The reason that I don't give him the benefit of the doubt quite yet, I'm either neutral. I flip flop game to game to being like neutral or at a deficit in terms of like, yo, do I trust his ability to become that? Part one is becoming that is very difficult, right? Like we're talking about James Harden, who in his prime was a perennial MVP candidate and willed the Rockets to, the Western Conference Finals twice. So that's pretty rare air, right? If Kevin Porter Jr. was to become that, he'd be defeating the odds just objectively. Second is because a big part of becoming that is your decision making. And he has demonstrated that he's a poor decision maker, both on and off the court. And that when it comes time to make certain decisions, he like kind of melts and has like lashing out, moments of lashing out, right? That's the reason. If he was a more composed, if we just saw it, he's like very like fiery, like he makes a bucket, he's yelling. I always watch him. He talks a ton of shit, which is fine, but like he's very emotional and fiery, right? Not necessarily composed. And so that's the thing that like when I'm watching it, I'm hoping like, yo, hopefully he becomes Harden, but I'm just doubting it at the moment because of the decision making, right? But you're right. I mean, also part of what made James Harden was Mike D'Antoni. Give him his credit, right? Mike D'Antoni unleashed James Harden and helped him like fully realize that. So maybe Steven Silas is doing the same for KPJ. I think it's way too early to tell, but yeah. So it's like this mixed bag, right? Like the talent's there, the stats are there. If you compare it to last year, he's like obviously he's more efficient. The TS percentage for the last 32 something games is I think like I don't know off the top of my head, but I think it's somewhere between like 57 and above. It's good. And that's what you want to see, right? He's done it over the course of 30 something games. Even for the season, his numbers have gotten a lot better. He's almost at 53% TS. I think he's like 52.8. And earlier in the season, he was at like 47 or 48, 37% from three. He's turning the ball over 3.2 times per game. So that's down, like he's handling some of the tests well, and he is 21 turning 22 in March. The issue is that he's up for a contract extension soon. And so he's a restricted free agent, and the Rockets have a very like serious decision to make with him. And that's what worries me. And that's also why I'm so like focused on KPJs, because I know Jalen's under contract. I know Şengün's under contract. We don't know what's going to happen with anyone else on the team, but those are the two like main guys right now. KPJ is the third one, but he's up for an extension. So that's what complicates things.
And that's why this whole season too, right? All the way dating back to the very beginning, the whole reason that they tried to bench John, well, not did bench John Wall and put him on ice is because they knew that KPJ was like on a timeline, right? They had to figure out what they had or didn't have with Kevin Porter Jr. And I think that if you go back to the beginning stage of the season and you look at where Kevin Porter Jr. is at now as a player, how he's handled the growth and development as the season has progressed, I do think you have to chalk it up to a win, because the Rockets kind of, I don't know if the expression hedging your bets is like the right terminology here, but I'm going to go with it because it sounds like the right terminology. The Rockets were kind of hedging their bets thinking, all right, we know Jalen is going to like develop. We know that he's going to be like a bona fide like star. We know what we got with him, right? So they kind of, I think, sidelined the importance of Jalen Green's development and didn't spotlight him the way some of the other rookies across the league, Cade, Evan, Jalen Suggs, like were getting spotlighted in their respective teams or in their respective systems, because they had to focus on KPJ's development, right? They had to put the rock in his hands, let him make the decisions, let him make the mistakes, let him go through the speed bumps of trying to be the point guard for this Rockets team, for a really, really young Rockets team. And at that point, it was, pretty ridiculous in the sense of like trying to figure out what they had with KPJ. And it got to a point where I think you have to walk away at least a little bit confident in the abilities that he's shown. And I know that you're still kind of like, you said you're, kind of neutral, and then also somewhat like, maybe negative at times, kind of flip-flopping back and forth on KPJ. But for me, another area that I didn't get to mention earlier that I still think kind of gives me a little bit of hope or optimism with KPJ is that it's really tough to find, I think, a player who can go from being like that high level of a facilitator, playmaker, creator, whatever, and then go back right into like the scoring threshold that he has. And that's one of those other like areas that is kind of James Harden-esque when you look at KPJ's game, is the fact that on any given night, he can decide, all right, I'm going out and I'm going to rack up like 10 dimes tonight, right? We saw a stretch of the season where he would walk out, and in the first quarter, every single game for like a few weeks there, he was walking away with 3, 4, 5 dimes within the first quarter. And it became like a regular occurrence where he was walking out just trying to dime up his guys left and right. It was like a mental shift where he was like, I am going to work on getting these shots for my guys. And then there's some games where he walks out and he's like, no, I'm a bucket. I'm going to go get my points. And it's very similar to kind of what we saw James Harden do previously in his Houston career, where some nights he'd walk out and he would just very intentionally like not even be looking for his own shot for like an entire half. And then he'd walk out in the third quarter and be like, oh no, I'm James Harden. I'll just go get like 15 in the quarter really easily. And that dynamic ability to decide I'm going to be a scorer versus I'm going to be a playmaker, that's not exactly common. And that's where I still think like he has all the tools to be such a dynamic player. And it's just about like figuring out that balancing act between doing it consistently and it within a given game, within a given quarter, within a given couple minutes, deciding, okay, am I scoring? Am I playmaking? And like balancing that identity and not leaning all the way into one or the other.
So I agree with you. I mean, and that's what's enticing about him is it's like, man, there are nights where this guy looks like an all-star, a potential all-star, right? The stat lines are crazy, like let me look at these last games since Christian Wood has sat. I think Christian Wood sat starting with the San Antonio game. Or actually, I think he sat in the Portland game, the second Portland game.
That sounds right.
We're just going to go with it. If we're wrong, then I'm sorry. So from the Portland
don't
game,
aggregate us with our voices that we're using on this very podcast, but
the Portland game, the last 6 games, Kevin Porter Jr. is averaging 25 flat a game, 3.3 turnovers, 8.8 assists, 5.8 rebounds, shooting 82.6% from the free throw line on just under 4 attempts, which is much, much improved to his season average of like 62%. 37.1% from 3 on 10.3 attempts per game, and 47.4% from the field. Like, that's ridiculous, dude. 25, 9, and 6 on 47% from the field, 37% from 3, 83% from the free throw line, 3.5 turnovers. That's insane, okay? And so to have that on the contract he's on is like, wow. Now, the main issue just becomes, like I said, when he's up for an extension, and I was talking to Beam a Thug and Clutch fans. Shout out to both of them. We had a space and Bima like kind of explained the situation. And KPJ's up for an extension as a restricted free agent. So the Rockets are going to have to pay him real money. And that's the thing. That's why the decision making is so important.
Maybe not, right? Because that's what the beauty is about the restricted free agent situation is. Honestly, I think that the New Year's Day incident kind of cost KPJ the potential to extend him unless he balls
out next season.
Well, no, because the extension talks would happen this summer, right? Like that's where the extension would happen. And
that's the extension. That's not restricted free agency.
No, I know. So that's what I'm saying is like the extension talks have probably been like I think the New Year's Day situation probably just, all right, we're not going to extend you. However, I will play devil's advocate here and say they might still entertain those conversations if they think they can get him on a very team-friendly deal. Because if you think you can get KPJ locked down at like, 10, 12 million a year over like 3 or 4 years, maybe you take that deal and then let him roll into next season, right? And you've got him locked down under lock and key for the next 3-4 seasons, whatever, at a very team-friendly rate. That way, even if like KPJ falls off the wagon, right? And like the off-the-court issues become a thing, whatever, that 10 to 12 million is still a very aggregatable salary as far as trades are concerned. You're not like out there paying him 20, 25 mil, and then suddenly he's off his rocker and he's like, oh, what did we do? Why did we extend this guy? But if they don't extend him this summer and they do like go through next season, one, he's going to be on a contract year. And that's kind of, I'm like very 50-50 on contract years because it's almost like it could be like fool's gold, right? Where he's on his best behavior, he's balling out because it's a contract year. And like for Rockets legend Trevor Ariza was notorious for balling out in contract years and then like regressing to the mean the very next season. You're like, what happened? He was like an all-star last season and now he's playing like a regular role player. So that said, if KPJ does get to next season and if the Rockets don't extend him this summer and he balls out next year, and he looks really, really good, if some team throws the bag at him in restricted free agency and the Rockets have a chance to match it, I feel like they're going to feel pretty confident about matching any number that gets thrown at KPJ because the only reason a team would be throwing a number at him is because he played well. They're not going to try to throw the bag at somebody who had a mediocre subpar season.
But if he plays well, like you said, he might get 20-25.
And that is the big question is, do you feel comfortable paying KPJ at that point in the Rockets rebuilding time, like 20 to 25 a season, or do you let him walk to a team like, I don't know, the Kings, who are maybe going to throw the bag at the next, like, halfway
They
decent
won't because
asset
of
that becomes available on the market?
they won't because of De'Aaron Fox, but
Maybe
a team,
they want to put KPJ in the backcourt next to De'Aaron Fox. I grab
they
the
just
Kings
traded
as like a market that never gets like actual good free agents, like really like top tier free agents.
right.
So they keep coming away with like the B tier free agents, and that's kind of what KPJ
They
would
come
be
away
in
with
that
the C.
summer.
They come away with the C tier free agents, but they just traded Tyrese Halliburton. So if they're going to throw the bag at Kevin Porter Jr., that would be trading Halliburton and throwing the bag at KPJ to be in the backcourt would just be so weird to me. However, um, the downside to what you're saying, look, let me throw something at you. The type of point guard that I'm describing, that I've described, that would be like good for the Rockets, you could argue it's Ben Simmons, right? He can't shoot, but you could argue Ben Simmons next to KPJ and Jalen Green would be a lot of fun. But you know why I'm against that still, aside from the fact that Ben Simmons has all his issues and drama and can't shoot a three to save his life. He would be getting paid like 35 to 40 million dollars, something like that, right? In 2023. So I want that cap sheet to be as clean as possible, right? Like right now, it's just going to be Jalen Green, KJ Martin, Şengün, Josh, Usman, whoever they draft this summer, whoever they draft next summer. I think that's it, unless they guarantee Eric Gordon's contract, which I doubt they would for 21 million. Woods off the books, Wall's off the books. Gordon don't have to guarantee him. Jayshawn Tate, I think, is up for restricted free agency at the same time as Kevin Porter Jr. So it'll be interesting to see if they extend him this summer. Can they? I think they can. I'm not sure.
I believe that they can. Yeah, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. Right. So like, Nwaba's off the. Oh, Nwaba got 3.
Nwaba got 3.
But the last year, I think, is a team option. I think.
I believe so. Yes. So
if you could look that up while I'm talking, please.
Yeah, I got you.
But anyways, my point is, everyone's off the books, right? So I wouldn't want 35 something million wrapped up in Ben Simmons. And by that same token, do you want 20, 25 million wrapped up in KPJ? Now, if you extend him for cheap, the downside of that is, like, let's say $10 million, let's say $12 million per year, 3 years, 36 million this summer, which I don't think he would take, but let's just say, if he doesn't pan out, right? If he continues to have these issues and he fizzles off and like he's just a total head case, then you're stuck with 12 million for 3 years. And does it eat up a lot of your cap? No, but it does dig into some of it. And in addition to that, like, what are you going to do with that? So that's the downside and the issue. Now, the bet and the gamble is like, yo, he's maturing. He's not going to continue doing this, but yo, he can't do this again. Like this season it happened, but if the Rockets want to become a winning team, like not the worst team in the league, if they want to become like, hey, we won 28 games or 30 games or just like improvement over season by season, you can't tolerate that culturally. No. Because that's not the message it sends, that you're a winning team. That's not going to attract free agents. I mean, Evan Mobley's dad legitimately didn't want, unless I got duped by Ballsack Sports or something. So if I did, my bad. But unless I got sacked, Evan Mobley's dad.
Why'd you have to say sacked? Like with that inflection too?
Because that's if you've ever seen the tweets, that's what they say. They're like, "Oh, you've been sacked." Like when Stephen A. Smith gets sacked by Ballsack Sports. It's actually honestly hilarious. Ballsack Sports one time tried to get me, and they misread my tweet, and I responded to them, and they apologized, and we made cool on it. So that was actually pretty funny. I think Ballsack Sports is hilarious. But
so what you're saying is Ballsack Sports got rooshed?
Oh, dude. Yeah, they did. But regardless, Evan Mobley's dad legitimately did not want Evan Mobley to be in Houston because of Kevin Porter Jr., right? So, and because he was an assistant on the USC coaching staff or whatever, and was around both of them. So that's a real thing. People saying, "Oh, you just hating on KPJ, this, that." No, it's a real thing, right? Like if Jalen Green wasn't awesome and we were thinking, "Oh my God, I wish we had Evan Mobley." Could you imagine if, we didn't get Evan Mobley because of KPJ? How stupid would that be, right? So consider that, because people are like, "Oh, it only happened, a few times." It happened a few times more than it happens to anybody else in the NBA. Like that shit is not tolerated, right? So, he hopped in his car and drove home. Now, I as someone who has like done some wild shit in the past, I'm not going to hold his feet to the fire over that. He can mature and get better. But it's a difficult thing to do, right? Like it's not an easy thing to do, to just ditch those instincts and habits to just like get buck wild when you're pissed off. So, we'll see. I hope if he can turn the corner and play efficient basketball and then eventually learn how to manipulate defenses and like just really like mature, he could be a star. And I was one of the biggest proponents of him, but I was disappointed by the first half of the season. I'm very encouraged by the last half of the season. He's still doing some of those things though, like not passing to Jalen Green in the clutch, and boom, 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 booming the shit out of the ball on possessions. Like yes, he dropped 36 against the Nets, and yes, it was like the tank squad with half of the payroll not playing in the game, and all of that's true. So I'm not going to like use that game as like, oh my God. But he does that in more situations than just that game in these last few games. So like if he can get over that and find that blend and that balance that you were talking about, he could be really good.
I think that's, the area, right, that you mentioned before, right, is just him like repeatedly like pounding the air out of the basketball like way too much on a given possession or throughout a given game. That's definitely like an area that you'd like to see improve upon. I felt like, early in the season, especially, like he did way too much dribbling, and at times would even like dribble like half the shot clock out and then pick up his dribble with nowhere to go with it. And that was like one of the most frustrating things to see earlier this season. Like he was just so indecisive with what he was trying to do on the floor every single night. And he like started to slow things down. He had the injury where he missed that chunk of time, said that he was really able to go over some film, kind of like approach the game in a different way. And I think that time did wonders for him. And I think the time that Jalen Green missed with his hamstring injury also did wonders for him to kind of come back and, approach the game from a slightly different angle, kind of see some of the things that they had been missing out on. But with KPJ, and what kind of gives me, again, just another area of like a little bit of optimism, right, is two things. One, he and Jalen Green absolutely, like, they adore each other, right? Like they are brothers. They're bought into each other's success, like all of that. The way that you hear these two guys like speaking about each other, they are completely bought in. They're whatever the inverse is of like, KP or Evan Mobley's dad not wanting like Evan Mobley to play here alongside KPJ for whatever
The
reason.
inverse of Harden and Chris Paul.
There you go. Or the inverse of John Wall and James Harden, or James Harden and a lot of his ex-teammates. Subtle dig at James Harden here, but it's okay.
That was pretty overt, but yeah.
Okay, well, an overt dig at James Harden here. Hey, look, he's a Sixer now. The Sixers don't own any of the Rockets picks, and so go get that chip, James. But point is, Jalen Green and Kevin Porter Jr., I think, are bought into each other's success, right? And they're both, to me, I think, incredibly unselfish players in the sense of they're not going like, I think either one of them would be content to go out there and rack up 12, 15 assists, whatever, if that's the case, if it means winning basketball. Like we consistently see them making the right decisions on the basketball court, not necessarily playing me first basketball. Even when KPJ is like out there trying to get his shots off, I don't think he's going out there with the exclusive intent of I'm going to go out there and get mine. Nobody else on the court matters. I think he just sometimes. Sure.
Can I pause you? I don't think you're wrong. The problem is his instinct is to do what?
His instinct is to score.
And his instinct is like so instinct is your first nature, right? It's like you're subconsciously, like that's what you're doing before you're even thinking. So before he's thinking, like actively thinking, because he does go out, I don't think he goes out there like, nah, fuck y'all, it's me. I think he goes out there and just doesn't realize it. Like he's like, oh hell yeah, boom, 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 defender, boom, 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 shot. And it's fine. But you know what I mean? So like I prefer, and it's a stylistic basketball thing, but I prefer the guy whose first instinct is, okay, how can I get, an open shot? Like whoever gets that shot, doesn't matter. Like, where's the open shot? Where's the mismatch? What are they running? How should I beat that? His first instinct is, who's guarding me? All right, cool. Watch this. And that's, sometimes he drops 36 and sometimes he has a 30-point triple double. And then sometimes it's like, damn, we needed the right play and we didn't get it in a close game. The other thing that's important to mention
well, because I had the secondary point that I wanted to get in there, and the only other point was just about their relationship, right? Their dynamic is, I think that in and of itself, right? If KPJ has the mental maturity to realize, hey, I'm not the guy, right? Like I can be the secondary guy maybe, or I can be the tertiary guy, but like Jalen is the guy. Like the other night against the Nets, Jalen not attempting his first shot until like 7 minutes into the game, absolutely unacceptable. That can't happen. You need a point guard. You need your point guard to orchestrate that and make sure that the best option, the number one option on the team, gets that. And I think that this offseason is going to be critical for them to kind of come back in next season with more of a clearly defined hierarchy. Like now we see this insane stretch that Jalen Green is on right now. He needs to come in next season and be the de facto number one option. Like, yeah, he went through his like molding period this season, the PJ Tucker-esque role sitting in the corner for, so many possessions offensively, all of that, whatever the Mr. Miyagi stuff that Steven Silas was doing to try and like, mold Jalen Green and get him to a point where he was like ready to be the guy. We're seeing him unleashed now at this point in the season. So next season, they need to come in with Jalen Green clearly as the number one option. Nobody else is ahead of him in the pecking order. And then the secondary and tertiary options, that's where you're like, okay, well, if Christian Wood's still on the roster, like, fine, maybe he's still here. You're the second option now, Christian. Sorry, you're behind Jalen in the pecking order. KPJ, all right, maybe you're the third option. Maybe you're the second option. I don't know. But that's the thing, is their relationship leads me to believe that KPJ shouldn't take an issue to taking a backseat to Jalen. And that's what I'm like optimistic of, because in this stretch without Christian Wood, those two have looked phenomenal. So if you can put the right pieces around those two guys and then have like a guy who is like Alperen Şengün, who can kind of maybe alleviate the fact that KPJ isn't like that cerebral, natural like point guard on the floor. Maybe you run a little bit more of the offense through Alp and have your two dynamic guards out on the perimeter doing whatever. I think there's something there. I just don't know. I'm not like you. I'm not 100% sold on it yet, which is why I'm also not ready to give up on KPJ quite just yet. Like, I'm not like get him out the door this summer. Like, I want to see them run it back next season with just a more clearly defined hierarchy of what the system is, with ideally like Jalen number one, KPJ number two, and like, I don't know, Jabari Smith and Alp like 3-4, like whatever that looks like.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say, imagine Jabari Smith next to Jalen and KPJ. Jabari Smith, like, defending the perimeter, spreading the floor, providing some release valve for the offense. Alperen Şengün, and then like an actual big man behind him. Like, that would be fun, The last thing I was going to say about KPJ is he missed some time this season. He like rolls his ankle every other game, and the injury concerns are real. Like, don't overlook that. He kind of got hurt a lot this season. He's played 59 games. So if he plays the last two games, he's going to play 61 games this season. That's only 4 more than our good buddy Karis LeVert has played in his second most played games of his career, not counting this season. He might eclipse that by 1 game this season, I think, which was 57 games in his second season in the NBA. So 61 games is missing 21 games a lot. And if you're going to pay someone big money, I would like to make sure he's not injury prone, because I don't think we know that yet, He's really only played the equivalent of like an NBA season and like a quarter or
Some
a half
change,
or something.
yeah.
Some change, So Draymond fell on him, gave him that thigh issue, which persisted throughout the season. Rolls his ankle a lot. So like, I kind of want to consider that as well. But yeah, man, look, him and Jalen look awesome as a 1 and a 2, as the 1 and 2 option, and as the 1 and the 2, I guess. It's been fun. Put the right people around them. If Christian Wood is on this roster and he's not traded, and it messes up what they just built, this like feeling and chemistry and I don't know, confidence that they've built, it will be a step backwards. So I hope personally that it doesn't happen. But speaking of Jalen Green, though,
man has been balling. Like, what else can you say? I mean, he's breaking. It's like every single game he breaks a new record. Like, it's actually absurd that this is what Rockets fans kind of wanted all season long out of Jalen Green. And I do look, I think that Steven Silas has gotten a pretty bum rap all season long. And I think that maybe
for what?
For a lot of things, man, for lineups, for just stuff that he could or couldn't control. Like, okay,
his lineups have been bad.
Like, what would you do differently? I mean, obviously, like the double big stuff at the very beginning was atrocious, but then like from that point,
okay, first of all, yes, that was atrocious.
Yeah,
and that was almost 1/5 of the season, so like that's not a small thing. Took him a while. He hasn't started KJ Martin. He continues to play and look, we want to lose these games, so like I'm not necessarily tripping. I'm just saying, from a basketball perspective, when I look at it, I'm like, that's not smart. He continues to play Jayshawn Tate. Christian Wood's out, so who's he playing at center? Şengün, Garuba. Great. I like that, but Tate can't,
I
shoot,
think, and look
or
on
with
the
those
on
guys.
the on the Jay Sean
Now,
Tate front, right? Because
yeah,
this is
is he
this is a
gonna
big one.
is he gonna bench Tate after starting him for 2 seasons?
No, and
No.
that's the hardest part. And even if you make the argument that he should have done it earlier this season, I think that earlier this season, while KPJ was still adjusting to the point guard role, and while Jalen Green was a very fresh rookie and obviously like did not hit the ground running the way that a lot of Rockets fans were expecting him to, having Jay Sean Tate in the starting lineup, albeit yes, alongside the Daniel Tice, Christian Wood, like which I think that the double big lineup gets a really bad rap when realistically, I think it's because you had two non-shooters in Jay Sean Tate and Daniel Tice that just mucked up everything. I think you could have maybe gotten away with it if you had EG out there in place of Jay Sean Tate, right? Or a Garrison Matthews, somebody that's actually going to space the floor a little bit. But that's just not the lineup they rolled with. And sure, give Steven Silas all the hell in the world for that decision. But as they like transitioned away, moved away from Daniel Tice starting, all of that, and stuck with Jay Sean Tate, I think a big reason for that is because he like one, you have the defensive presence that he provides. Two, you have his like actual like help on bigs that Christian Wood like physically cannot check because how many times this season have we seen Jay Sean Tate kind of carry the load defensively for Christian Wood?
Boo. Tomato.
Okay, keep tomatoing, that's fine. And then it still goes back to your point about, right, you're not going to bench Jay Sean Tate in the middle of the season. To me, that's like one of those things that is like an off-season type decision, right? Especially for a young team like the Rockets. And KJ Martin, he has come on really strong here in the back half of the season, especially with his shooting. I've been a proponent of like KJ Martin should probably be, at least in the starting discussion for the Houston Rockets next season. But that's not a switch that you make when you're a tanking team, when you're in the bottom of the league, and when you have the trust and that established relationship between Jay Sean Tate and Steven Silas, who's been the starter historically. Like, you don't just pull the plug on him halfway through the season, especially when you've got a losing record and you're not playing for anything. That's how you develop like a locker room issue.
Potentially, but here's respectfully why you're wrong. Number one, first and foremost.
I thought I was going to escape the first and foremost, and then it happened.
You tried to get out of it. I brought it back. First and foremost, he's trying to win games. Okay. Now, I don't blame him for trying to win games for his own personal. He wants to be a head coach in the NBA. I get that. I don't want him to win games because we obviously want the best odds possible at the number one pick and no lower than the fifth pick. We all understand that. But he's trying to win games and he's starting Garrison Matthews in an attempt to win games. Okay. Respect to Garrison Matthews. But when you're trying to win games with the roster that we're given right now, that's not a smart decision. We just discussed Jay Sean Tate. Here's the other thing. If you're coaching for the future, right? Well, first of all, let's just use like normal logic. He wants to win games. Okay, we're the worst team in the league. Okay, why does he keep trying the same shit? Right? It took him 16 games to switch it up, and then he just found his lineup and stuck with it, and they weren't successful. So, and that links me to the final point. The final point is, if you're trying to coach for the future and secure a job and like prove you're the head coach of the Houston Rockets and that, this is for you and you deserve to be that guy, then you can't afford for next season to be bad. Right? So why not exhaust all your options and experiment and find a winning formula now while you already are the worst team in the league so that you don't have to waste time doing that next season when you can't afford to be the worst team in the league from the perspective of Steven Silas hoping to not get canned, right? So I don't know. And just from a basketball perspective, dude, like try different things, but try the right things. How many times have we seen him put two non-shooters on the floor, like two very drastically bad non-shooters, like Tate and Nwaba or Tate and Tice, Tate and Şengün, whatever it is, right? And then also just the lack of he just doesn't seem to read games right. But I don't want to rag on we weren't going to rag on Silas today. I don't want to rag on Silas. I get it. I think he's done a good job of development, and I think that speaks to his nature as like a supporting developmental assistant coach. I do question his read of the game in real time from the perspective of like making adjustments on the fly. I haven't seen something that shows to me that he stands out in any given way. I also haven't seen game to game type adjustments that would indicate that either. And that's what my issue is. And look, Earl Watson was in Phoenix before Monty Williams took him over the top. Mark Jackson was in Golden State before Steve Kerr took him over the top. Dwayne Casey was in Toronto before Nick Nurse took him over the top, And we respectfully probably did not know who Nick Nurse was. He was a head coach of the Vipers, but like it wasn't like, oh my God, Nick Nurse. The Raptors got Nick Nurse. He's going to be their head coach. They're going to be awesome. Like no one knew that. Steve Kerr, I think, was announcing or GMing for the Suns or something. No, you know, like these things happen. And I don't think everyone should get so caught up over the coach. Coaches leave, coaches set teams up and leave, and someone else comes in with different skills that's able to take them over the top, you know? So I don't know. I'm not like stuck to I'm not stuck to Silas or stuck to that process or whatever. Prove it. If it's not the case, trust me, there will be somebody else available that can do just as good a job, possibly better.
I am glad you highlighted at least like the developmental stuff, because I do like, again,
Yeah, he's not a shit coach. Like, you know, I rag on him, but like he deserves his credit. But there are different segments of being a coach. Like, you know, there's developing players, there's relating to players, there's getting players to like you, there's getting players to respect you, there's being able to read the game in real time and adjusting correctly and appropriately, there's adjusting game to game, there's knowing when to put your foot, you know, there's like all these things. And he checks some of the boxes, but he doesn't check, I think, most of the boxes. So it's not like, oh my God, Steven Silas is awful. It's just like, hey, he's done some things well, but I do question whether he's the guy when the time is right. I do question whether he's the guy.
Yeah, whether or not he'll be the coach when the Rockets are, you know, a playoff team again, or when they're winning again. Absolutely. That's a very like valid question to have. And I do think that it's important to remember, just like with all these rookies, right? With all these young players on the Rockets roster, this is also like Steven Silas's like first, like, well, you know, second season as a legitimate head coach, but obviously last season's a bit of a wash, just the way everything happened. But like he had a really great answer during one of the pressers like earlier this season. And I'm like blanking. I think I asked him the question, but I'm actually not 100% sure. I think I did. And it was like,
was
about
it our good friend, what's his name? You know, our friend that has a credential. Oh, what's his
name? Drawing a blank. No.
It's a joke.
Now I understand. No, anyways, no. Basically, I asked Steven Silas about like his relationship with Kevin Porter Jr. and how KPJ's helped him grow as a coach. And he went on like this great like 2-minute answer, just talking about the fact that he's still like trying to like find his own like almost identity, right? Like as a coach, and how things are very different when you're an assistant versus being the head coach, and that there's certain lines in the sand that you can't like, that you can cross as an assistant that have to be like, you know, he has to handle players differently as the head coach, right? And that's an important like boundary kind of step for him to learn. And I do think that he's been trying to grow and learn and identify his like voice, like as the head coach, right? Like figuring out kind of who he is and growing into that personality. And I do think that you look at, obviously last season just was a wash. The whole James Harden thing to start the year, whatever, wasn't the real ground floor of the rebuild, right? That was like a transitional year. This was really like rebuild year number one. And obviously the Rockets are going to finish with potentially the worst record in the NBA for a second season in a row. But I do think that there's been spurts of growth. You see the development that the young guys have taken, all of that. And I do think you have to give credit to Steven Silas and the coaching staff for, you know, a majority of that, if not all of it, but a majority of it. Sure. Maybe you make the argument some of these guys would have just, you know, had this natural progression in their game as well, but whatever. Next season is the year, right? Like next season is like the deciding year for Steven Silas, right? If the Rockets come out of the gate and they're like flat, and they have another like huge losing streak to start the season, and we don't see the adjustments being made, and we see like the same exact story that played out at the beginning of this season, then yeah, I don't think Steven Silas makes it even halfway through the season. That said, like next year's like his legitimate shot, where if we do see growth, if we see progression, if we see them like vying for a play-in spot, then I think you hold on to him and you kind of see like where he's going to be able to take this thing. Maybe he's still not the guy to like take them to the promised land. But next year is going to be that pivotal year to decide, is he going to be the long-term coach of the Rockets? Like, does he get like another crack at it? Or is he like out halfway through the season and they, you know, jump over to John Lucas or Will Weaver or somebody else on the roster as like an interim coach?
Last thing I'll say about Steven Silas. You just said that he's still finding his identity. I've tweeted a lot about how this team does not have an identity in terms of a positive identity. They have a negative identity and negative characteristics about them.
Also, I want to throw it in there. I'm paraphrasing because I'm remembering a quote from like midway through the season. But again, it was just, yeah, something about like more or less him talking about how KPJ's helped him with his growth and how he's still establishing himself as a head coach. So paraphrasing.
Okay, so quote verbatim from Steven Silas that he lacks identity. Okay,
yes, exactly. So, that's the one. Aggregate me, please.
Yeah, regardless. So, but and that's what it's looked like though. And that's why on one hand, you know, I got love for him. On the other hand, I mean, this is a cutthroat thing. teams don't have years to waste like that. Every year that doesn't go according to plan is a setback. And you either got to pull a rabbit out your hat to get that time back and move forward, or you got to endure it the long way. And that's, some teams find that out the hard way.
But to your point, I think if you look at this year, right, with the objectives that most reasonable Rockets fans had in their mind, this year has gone exactly according to plan. Like nobody, and I don't think even anybody like in the organization would have expected them to be like competitive this season, right? I think that
that's what I'm saying.
This year was a developmental year, right? Like this year was
what I'm
about
saying,
the
though.
development of the rookies. And so I do think this year has to be like, it did go in favor of what they wanted it to. Like this season, you have to chalk it up as a win. And so like, even though the Rockets are the worst record in the NBA, like, and even though there are some question marks about this team moving forward, and Steven Silas specifically, I think you do have to give him a credit. Like this is a dub, because Jalen Green is now performing at an elite level. Alperen Sengun has shown flashes. Josh Christopher looks like an absolute steal. Like KJ Martin has shown growth and development. Like everybody across the board has gotten better.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. I'm agreeing with you. Okay. I'm saying when it doesn't go according to plan. So like so far it's gone according to plan, right? Next season, if it happens again, is that according to plan?
No, and that was the point. Yeah, that and I think we're on the same page there. That was kind of the point that I was making. Just like it's next year's the pivotal year, right?
Right. Let me be clear. I'm not saying fire him or anything like that, but I agree with you. Next year is the year where it's like, okay, let's see that jump. Let's see some type of tangible jump that gives us confidence and gives us something to look forward to, right? Kevin Porter Jr., Jalen Green right now, they're giving us something to grab onto and say, okay, wow, I can't wait for next season when this gets even better. Steven Silas, other than developing young guys, hasn't, as an X's and O's, like as a coach, as a game manager, I haven't seen it. So, but we were going to talk about Jalen Green. We went off a tangent and talked about Steven Silas, which I think was actually a little more interesting because there's not much to say about Jalen Green except for the fact that he's just been kicking ass. Like that's it. I'll just say that real quick. He's been kicking ass, taking names. I personally think he cemented his place on the all rookie first team. Zach Lowe and Pelton. I don't even know his first name. Kevin Pelton. Whatever, Raymond Felton, Kevin Smelton, go to hell, respectfully.
First and foremost.
First and foremost, respectfully. But, putting Herb Jones over Jalen Green on the first team. Herb Jones has been great, phenomenal defensively. Just a great role player for the Pelicans. But, I mean, Jalen Green's like breaking rookie records, so 17 a game on efficiency that is 0.2% less than big man Evan Mobley is like, it's crazy. So,
the Jalen Green stuff has been phenomenal to see, and he absolutely, I'm in full agreement, he should be a lock for all rookie first team. Now, but before we dive into these questions, because I know that's where we're headed next, I got to ask you this, Roosh. Do you think he has at least an outside shot right now to finish in top 3 of rookie of the year voting? Because that's where I'm a little torn.
No, he doesn't because Scotty
Evan,
Barnes,
Cade, and Scotty have been incredible.
Well, they've been incredible. But at the same time, like if you just pay attention to how the race is being covered, it's like those 3 and then everyone else. That's how they're viewed. When NBA Twitter and all like the Vorp crowd and all that gets like their guy, like, oh my God, Jokic is, whatever. Whenever they get their narrative, like that's what it is. And that's the narrative. It's between those 3 and nobody else. And I don't blame them. I mean, Jalen had a very rough like first half. So it's a season long award. But no, he's finishing 4th. And no higher.
That's tough.
It's all good. I just want to make first team.
All right, first team all rookie, and we'll be happy.
He could potentially lead all rookies in scoring. I think he needs to score 48 points over the next 2 games combined, 48 points to tie Cade, something like that.
Oh, that's easy. He'll get that in his sleep. Well, I said that now and I cursed it. Like he's gonna walk away like 2 of 17 over the next 2 games, and everybody's gonna be like, it's Jackson's fault.
To tie Cade at 17.3 if Cade doesn't play again. So if he does that on like near league average efficiency as a rookie shooting guard, come on, dog.
That's a lock for first team.
Come on.
All right. Well, with that, let's dive into these questions because we got about first off, thank you to everybody who asked questions via Twitter. We got a ton of great responses. We pulled about half of them, just kind of like, parsing through, picking our favorites. We definitely ignored Don and Paolo, did not answer y'all's question whatsoever. So shout out to those 2 guys. But let's get to
welcome to Houston, Paolo. By the time you see this, you'll be in H-Town, baby.
Yeah, welcome to the H. We're gonna show him a great time. It's unfortunate that we don't have the Macedon in effect here in Houston to really show him these Houston streets, but we'll
Wish
get
I
you
could
down
be
here some
there.
other time. All right.
Wish I could be there, if only to just be at Urban South and have a brouhaha with the boys. But unfortunately, I'm on the West Coast, baby. But let's get into it.
All right. So we got this. Whoa, pardon me. We got this very first question here from at Mike L. Sala. And he basically asked Seawood being a part of the offense versus the offense running through him. And I think there was a bit more to this question just in the sense of, see something that I believe you've stated before, Roosh, like, in the Rockets Twitter spaces on your Twitter feed, talking about Christian Wood kind of viewing himself as the offense running through him versus if he were on another team like Golden State Warriors or the Phoenix Suns, would he be more willing to maybe like accept a secondary role where he's more so a part of the offense rather than being the offense unto itself?
Yeah, I mean, if he would be willing to be like a third guy, if he would let KPJ and Jalen Green do their thing, and he was just setting screens and crashing the basket, catching and shooting, catching and attacking closeouts, occasionally doing his ISO thing, not posting up, not bringing the ball up. If he was doing that, dude, he would be very like potent on offense, and he is very potent on offense, even aside from that. But he would really contribute to like winning on the offensive side. But Mike, thanks for the question. However, ultimately irrelevant because he is defensively just doesn't cut it, unfortunately,
Now we got our next one here. Let's see, make sure I get this name right because this name is brutal. I'm just gonna spell it out at JOCXYA underscore Joxia. I'm gonna go with that. That sounds about right.
Yeah.
Joxia. All right. What combo of 5 players, possibly including the 2022 first round pick, is ideal to maximize offense and defense? So I assume we can go with like any combo of the 5 on the roster right now, and then I guess we're just like kind of hypothetically picking, let's say first overall, and we'll just snag somebody off the draft board. Roosh, you go first. What you got?
Okay.
We're gonna have the exact same lineup. I call it, or I can go first if you want me to go first.
I'll go. I'll go. Jalen, KPJ, Jabari, KJ, and I mean you got to get a big, so it's got to be Şengün, maybe Garuba for defensive purposes only, but offense and defense. I say Şengün. So I say Şengün, Jabari, KPJ, Jalen, KJ.
Yeah, I mean, it's either that version of that lineup or potentially, and as I approach the NBA draft, I may sway a little bit back and forth, but you could swap out Jabari for Chet Holmgren, and then we're talking about KJ Martin at the 3, which I guess Jabari and KJ are kind of interchangeable when you look at what they both bring to the table offensively, defensively. Like both of those guys could play 3 or 4. It doesn't really matter on either end of the floor. But with Chet Holmgren in that lineup specifically, I mean, I think that you cover a lot of size. I don't know. I just did a whole breakdown podcast on Chet Holmgren with the guy that hosts Locked on Zags, Andy Patton, and he improved my opinion of Chet quite a bit. He didn't convince me. I'm still Jabari Jungle. I'm still Jabari Smith #1, but I am less worried about Chet translating to the NBA level now than I was before. From a guy who's watched him for an entire season, much more in depth than I could have ever hoped to do this past year, I feel a little bit more confident about Chet Holmgren.
Yeah, I went with Jabari. I went with Jabari Jesus over Chet Holmgren because I was going with the high floor that Jabari I think automatically would bring on the wing, versatile defender, switchable guard 1 through 4, and still protect the rim. Not like that, not like a rim protector, but can still block some shots and use his length to kind of make things a little bit difficult. That combined with Şengün being like a sneaky good shot blocker, that's where I was at.
All right, let's roll to our next one. As also at Joxia. Thanks for the question. Amazing at. I think that's Macaroni on Twitter actually. So like I'm just gonna go with that. I probably just should put his like actual like title handle, whatever. All right, next question from at H-Town Cam. And I think we've got a couple from H-Town Cam. Yeah, we got back-to-back ones here. So let's go with this first one. Is Şengün a building block / relatively untouchable? I'm torn on this, Roosh, because I think that ultimately the only player on this team that you can maybe, comfortably label as untouchable is Jalen Green, especially with how, I mean, like, and even then it's like when you're this early in a rebuild, like nobody should be untouchable, right? Like,
yeah,
it sucks, but it's like if somebody called up and, was like, hey, like, John Morant for Jalen Green in like some weird like Black Mirror-esque reality, right? Like Jalen Green's not fully untouchable, but he's like 99.9% untouchable. Is Şengün in that same tier? I don't think so, unfortunately. Like, he's shown flashes. He's been great, and there's a lot of promise there. I don't think he's untouchable. Like, if the right offer were to come along for Alperen Şengün, I think you probably make a deal for it, depending on what it looks like.
Yeah, I think Jalen Green is the only objective untouchable. Şengün, I think reasonable minds could differ. I totally agree with the people that think that he's not untouchable. I wouldn't say he is untouchable, but I think he's a building block, and I think he could be relatively untouchable. I could accept that. I am emotionally attached to him, so that's part of it. I just think he's special. I'm still rosy-eyed and cheeky and shit and fucking honeymoon phase with him in terms of believing in his ability to get over the hump of his like quote unquote limitations at the moment. But it's also very very realistic that he doesn't. I don't think he's a sure thing. I just believe in him.
Here's a good test for you. Would you trade Şengün for a top 4 pick in this year's draft?
Shit.
I know that's a tough one. I don't know. I can't give credit. Somebody like proposed this or like a version of this like hypothetical the other day, and I like saw it. I mean, it was one of those where I was like just mindlessly scrolling the TL, and I saw it and I froze, and I was like, oh man, like I had that moment where I was like, that's what made me objectively quite like, because if you would, he's not.
I mean, if you could take any two of Chet, Banchero, and Jabari, and you remove Şengün, that's.
I know it's tough, and
or
that's
you could just bring Şengün off the bench, but I don't know. Yeah, so it's tough though, right? And ultimately, it's like, is he at 6'9" with his athletic limitations? It's tough, but I just think he's smart and he's a sneaky good shot blocker, and he's still so young. And I think he could hit 6'10", maybe 6'11" if he like really grows.
He needs that Ryan Hollins growth spurt.
Yeah, we got to get him some collagen and some turmeric and some, whatever's in all those drinks that people drink to boost their systems. But anyways, I don't know.
All right, let's go to our next one from H-Town Cam. He gets to double dip here. Why does Garuba get such little love?
Easy, because he looks awkward. I believe in him. Like, I think he's smart, and I think he knows how to use his skills, and he'll be a very like valuable role player. But he just looks awkward when he runs. When he gets beat off the dribble, when he looks slow sometimes, like it just looks bad. His shot looks awkward. He doesn't have like offensive skill at the moment. Like, he just looks awkward. So people kind of write it off.
He also just hasn't gotten enough run this season, right? Like, it's unfortunate, but he was always going to be the developmental guy. Like, and I think to an extent, like LP was also going to be kind of a project this season. And then they kind of hit the ground running. They were like, oh, this guy can like play. And they even like altered their timeline plans by shipping Daniel Tice out to make more room for Alperen Şengün in the rotation. So Usman Garuba is always going to be the guy that needed to go spend some time at the G League, really, refine his game. His offensive game is like just so raw. Like he needs so much work on that end. You see the flashes defensively. I'm really optimistic about his role. And so is Steven Silas. So is the organization. They are very, very high on what he can bring to the table. Anytime you hear them talking about him, they want him to understand like he has a place on this team moving forward. They just got to like, kind of round out some of the rougher edges of his game. But let's go to our next guy. Appreciate the questions, Cam. Let's go to our next question here from @RussellWing. How will we get playing time for all these young players? 6 first-round draft picks plus KJ need playing time. Yeah, that's, half the roster.
Honestly, I have no idea. That's the crazy question. That's also why if you want to keep Christian Wood, consider like it's logistically going to be difficult. Maybe that Brooklyn pick goes to the G League. Maybe Garuba goes to the G League. Yes, but at some point, like,
you need to consolidate is what needs to happen. Like, I don't think it's real. Like, it was already crazy to me that the Rockets made 4 first-round picks in this past year's draft. I was fully convinced they were going to try and package a couple picks and like move up. And I guess technically they sort of did. Actually, I apologize because going into the draft, right, they didn't have the 16th pick for LP. They had the 2 late 20s and the number 2. I was convinced they were going to package those 2 late firsts and like come in and, move up in the draft somehow. And they wound up packaging some of their future assets to do that. They need to consolidate in the worst way this offseason. And that means probably moving on from Christian Wood. Like, I'm honestly, I'm going to be shocked if Christian Wood is still here next season. I will be, because I think they've like, especially it depends on their draft pick. Like, if they pick up another big, if they pick up one of the 3 bigs in Jabari, Chet, or Paolo Banchero, then I think that's a telltale sign like Christian Wood's out the door and they're going to like completely buy into the youth movement, all of that. But they've got to do something to consolidate some of these assets because, I mean, Russell, you're right. They don't have enough playing time for all these young guys on the roster. It's just impossible at this point.
Last thing I'll say about this, that question and how difficult the answer to this question was is also why trading Eric Gordon for that like late first round pick in this draft is like, what would they have done with that? Like realistically, honestly, what would they have done with that? Maybe trade it for something, trade it for what, so consider that.
All right. We got our next question from @thecoachwells. Does falling to the number 4 pick automatically mean we have to pick Jaden Ivey? I'm going to say it absolutely does not mean that. Like, because while there's a very clear cut, like top 4, and it's a top 4 draft for sure, I think that there's a very realistic possibility that one, Shaden Sharp could be like he could be like the Scotty Barnes of this year's draft, where maybe there's a team, if they fall at number 4, that gets, I mean, you could even see Shaden Sharp maybe going to like number 3 or something. Like there's a lot of hype surrounding him, and he could very well be the guy that like kind of jumps, and even potentially like an AJ Griffin type could be the kind of guy that maybe jumps over a Jaden Ivey or maybe even a Paolo Banchero, depending on who those first 4 teams are on the board. So number 4 pick does not necessarily mean, oh, you're just getting Jaden Ivey, because those other 3 guys are not, in my eyes and many draft experts' eyes, not like directly above him in the draft pecking order. And somebody else could jump into that top 4, which maybe means that one of those other 3 prospects do fall down to number 4, and you kind of get your pick of whoever's left.
You could also trade the 4, maybe slap a Christian Wood on, maybe slap an Eric Gordon on with the 4, trade back, and get like a player that you want in return for a team that really sees star potential in Jaden Ivey and says like, yo, we're making this move. We're going to get in our guy. Jaden Ivey's our guy. And Houston's the team that completes that trade. So I wouldn't rule that out. Total guess, but it's possible.
Yeah, if they were to trade away from the top 4, even if it means like not like at that point, I'd be very disappointed if they traded away from a top 4 pick, even if it is Jaden Ivey, because the idea of a Jaden Ivey, like think about a 3-man lineup of a Jaden Ivey, Jalen Green, and Kevin Porter Jr. You put KPJ.
I don't think that works.
I think.
Look. Do you go best talent available? Yes, but they're all scoring guards.
I'm a little bit more high on like Ivey's like actual like creation ability.
Can you
I think that does
you
kind
just
of
made. Can you like clip that? It was like
no, I don't want to.
I don't know what that sound was. Have you ever seen the South Park movie?
Yeah, I have.
when they're like, dude, it sounds like a dying giraffe. That's it.
Oh, okay, all right. Well, I'll try and find it, and I'll clip it later. My goodness, this is already going off the rails. It's a good thing we've only got a handful of questions left.
Yeah, let's get through this.
Appreciate the question from Mr. Wells there. Let's go to our next one here from Hot Hamwater. What a handle. Love that. How much should Rockets players not named Jalen Green impact who gets drafted?
Zero.
And honestly, to an extent, Jalen Green shouldn't even impact who you draft. You take the best player available. I think maybe because Jalen is showing that like franchise cornerstone potential, you kind of take him into account a little bit, but you shouldn't be taking anybody on your roster into account when you're looking at top prospects. That's just not how it works. You take best player available, best talent available, and you figure out the pieces later on. So,
Yep.
All right, let's go to our next guy here from Mr. J Sizzle. What's Tate's future / role going forward? Oh man, this would have been good when we were debating Jay Sean earlier.
Yeah. So I think he should go to the bench. On a winning team, he should go to the bench. I mean, I love everything about his game, but it's just suited for a bench role. He can't play power forward at 6'4" without a 3-point shot. It just can't, you see what happens, and it doesn't really work. Defensively, he's great, but the offense, the lack of offense or the lack of offensive fit, I think marginally or actually significantly outweighs the defensive impact that he has on a poor defensive team, and he's part of the reason we get beat up inside because he's our 4, so not only do we not have an actual 5, but he's our 4 at 6'4". So it was just doubly small. So I think he's got to be a bench player, and he could really thrive off the bench and fortify the bench so that they're not so young and like kind of loose with it. But yeah, bench.
Yeah, he could be that stabilizing force kind of off the bench. Biggest thing this season for me was like he's got to like iron out the 3-point shot, and he didn't do that, right? And you look at the guy down the bench who's his sub off the bench in KJ Martin, and KJ Martin has stabilized that 3-point shot to a place where it's like respectable, and defenses actually have to account for him. And they don't do that with Jaysean. They just ignore him on the 3-point line. It's unfortunate for everything that he brings to the table, but he's an undersized 4. He should realistically be a 3, but you can't be a 3 that's shooting 30% from the 3-point line unless you're surrounded by 2 guys named like Steph and Clay. Like that's the only situation where he could like potentially go and thrive with his shooting percentage the way that it is.
He's shooting 30.8% from 3 this year. He shot 30.8% from 3 last year. It's crazy how stats work themselves out. But yeah, and lastly about KJ finishes above the rim. So like he's an undersized 4. Yeah, he's and vertical spacing. He's an undersized 4, probably a 3 in reality. However, even at the role of a 4, he can at least like get an offensive rebound and finish it with authority. Whereas Jaysean Tate does that like pirouette hook stuff, and you just give up easy buckets like that sometimes.
Yeah. All right, let's go to our next one from @Pine Tar Spin God. These are some incredible handles. How long do you think the Rockets stick with KPJ at point? I think we kind of hammered this out earlier. I think it's at least maybe not through all of next season, but I think they're going to roll with him to start next season at the very least. You know, maybe if it's a dumpster fire, they move on from it like at the deadline or like change gears at the deadline. But
I have a gut feeling that they're trying to keep KPJ, unless he goes off the rails next season. But I think they're invested in him. At least that's just what it looks like. Maybe I'm wrong.
But no, absolutely. All right, let's go to our next one from good friend @Red94. My favorite player has been racking up a ton of assists. Does this mean he's a great point guard? And I couldn't fit the rest of the line in there, but he said, I'll hang up and listen. Roosh, I think this one's directed to you.
I think I talked about this somewhat earlier, but yeah, dude, just because you have assists doesn't mean you're a point guard. Domantas Sabonis has a ton of assists. He's not a point guard. Like assists really aren't that hard to get in the NBA because everyone can shoot. You just got to hand the ball to someone that can shoot, and because they give you 2, sometimes 3 dribbles from the 3-point line or wherever to the basket before you score also counts as an assist. So sometimes like someone will literally hand the ball to Jalen, he'll make a move and it's an assist, like, okay, congratulations. What makes you a point guard, like I said earlier, it's how you process the game, it's like a quarterback. I said this, I think, in a space. When Peyton Manning, Tom Brady get to the line of scrimmage, they're looking at the defense and saying, oh, this is what they're running and this is how we're going to beat them. And that's what I want from my point guard. You can have a point guard that's athletic and can sprint for the first down, and the defense can't catch up with him, and he makes incredible plays and like hits his check, the crazy highlight plays, has crazy like long touchdowns, all that shit that exists. But at the end of the day, when you want to win, you want that quarterback that gets to the line of scrimmage and says, oh, I know what the defense is running, watch this. And right now I don't see that from KPJ. Not to bring it back to, I guess he didn't mention KPJ, but yeah, but he could develop it. But that's what makes a point guard. Game management.
Game management. There we go. I love it. I love that we're like mixing sports here. We're going to do State of the Texans is going to be our next rollout. Look for that next year. No, I kid. We don't want to talk about the Texans like that.
Maybe State of the Astros.
There we go. Hey, I mean, that's that. At least one team's going to hopefully do something good this season. So, all right, let's get to our next question from @CA_Joey. In reality, if we want to move on from KPJ, who's an active, available point guard the Rockets could target to fit Green's timeline? Honestly, if I'm like trying to canvas like off the top of my head, that's the thing is, one, I don't have like the active research off the top of my head to like think of like who's a guy. I mean, because realistically, Jalen Green's super young, right? Like if you wanted like a point guard to fit his timeline, go draft Jaden Ivey. Like that's the thing is I think that KPJ is the best bet right now, right? Like there isn't necessarily a better option right there to like go and source this offseason and be like, we're going to pull in a guy right now. I think that you stick with KPJ, you kind of see what you have working there because you're still in this timeline where Jalen's still kind of developing, right? Like it's still his rookie season. Give him next season, give him like 1 or 2 more seasons kind of under his belt to get up to kind of where you think not his floor is going to be, but to really start to like kind of realize his potential at the NBA level. Like you look around the league, Trae Young, Luka, like all these guys start to kind of really hit their stride like that, like junior season, like their 3rd year in the league. Let Jalen get to that point, and then you can maybe start looking around the league and be like, okay, who are we going to pair with this guy in the backcourt? Because like KPJ hasn't worked out, whatever. Like, who are we going to pair with this guy to really like take this backcourt to the next level? So I don't think it's necessarily a worry to like look around right now and try to find who makes sense to pair with Jalen, because right now it just doesn't matter.
And that's another argument in favor of keeping KPJ. It's like, do you have another solution? So no. So why would you cut him loose? Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I don't know of anyone available that would fit right away. Also, superstars like Jordan, Kobe, Dwayne Wade, I think, LeBron, they didn't come into the league with like their running mate, and definitely not their point guard. And so Jalen's situation is a bit unique in that it could be KPJ, and maybe like that could be like the craziest little marriage the Rockets pulled. Like 3-4 years from now, it could look like the dopest shit the Rockets pulled off since James Harden. That backcourt, or it couldn't. I don't know, but no, I don't know of anyone available that would fit the bill. Unless
Because that's the problem, is anybody who's available that would match the timeline realistically is part of the timeline of the team that they're on, right? There's nobody that's really like out of
if
favor with their current team that's young enough that would pair well with Jalen's timeline.
if it was, they would have thrown a bag at Lonzo, or they would have entered the Tyrese Halliburton sweepstakes, or they would have traded for Ben Simmons. But I don't think they're high on Ben Simmons, clearly. So yeah, no one's available right now. Maybe someone will become available.
Yeah. All right, let's go to, we got 3 more here. Let's get through these. Which draft pick offers the most rim protection and isn't under 200 pounds, from @Rocket for Life? This is an easy one. Obviously, this is a shot at Chet Holmgren, who I'm a little bit more savvy on now. But Jalen Duren, he's like, if you want a shot blocking rim protection big, like Jalen Duren is your guy. And then not only that, but
Walker Kessler and Mark Williams
Walker
too.
Kessler. Yeah. Walker Kessler was going to be my other guy. And I do think that, like, realistically, one of those guys is going to be available by the time the Brooklyn pick is on the board, I think. It would be an absolute dream scenario if Jalen Duren is somehow still there. If he like falls, I don't think he's going to fall out of the top 10. No, Kessler is a bit more realistic, and it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world for me if the Rockets were to like try to like maybe package that Brooklyn pick and like move up a little bit higher in the draft to a team like maybe like Portland, who has a couple firsts that they're like sitting on. If they're really high on like one of those guys specifically, if they really want Duren, if they really want Kessler Edwards or something, maybe package up a little bit and, float a Christian Wood trade package or a Jayshawn Tate trade package to try and move up in the draft a little bit, something like that. Consolidate some of those assets.
I think Mark Williams and Walker Kessler, one of them will be available with the Brooklyn pick, I think, unless it falls to like, I don't know, 17 or something. So,
all right, this is going to be a quick one. Jalen Green over under 25 points per game next season, from @Tiz Sports Guy. There we go. Tiz Sports Guy. I'm going to go easy. That's under.
Yeah, under. I think he'll put up like 21 a game.
I thought that he had a shot to maybe break like 20 a game this season, just because like we were really like hype on him coming in, and maybe if
they would have given him shots, he probably would have.
You're right. He probably would have if he had gotten like kind of this level of like free reign like earlier in the season. But I also think that, it goes back to one of the points earlier about like Steven Silas and the development with the guys. Just, I think things would have maybe looked a little bit more rough around the edges, a bit more of a train wreck at times. And he probably still would have gotten to this point, but I don't think it would have looked as fluid as it does now. Cause it's like, he just like,
I wasn't complaining.
He got the keys to the car, and it's just, he started driving, man. It was great. It was great to see. Anyways, you said he's going to do what? 21 a game?
I think he's going to do like 21, 4 and 3 next season.
That sounds about right. I'll somewhere around there. I think he's gonna average at least 20 next season. I don't think he's gonna hit 25 though. Like, so somewhere around 20, 22, like in that range sounds about right. All right, let's go to our final question here. Who would y'all like to see starting at the 3 and 4 next season, from Alexius Diaz? We kind of already answered this a little bit, but I think that you and I both, Roosh, we're kind of like on the KJ Martin train. We're like, he should absolutely be in the starting conversation for the Rockets next season. I think at probably the 3 spot, if anything.
Well, it says the 3 and the 4. So I would say KJ and maybe Jabari.
I know. And that's where I was like, when we rolled out like our like, lineup from earlier, right? From that other question, we both kind of went with the Jabari lineup. I kind of hedged a little bit and said Chet maybe, but I think it's very entirely dependent on who the Rockets draft. But again, unless they walk away with Jaden Ivey, man, I think Christian Wood's out the door. Because how are you going to take a Paolo or a Chet or a Jabari? Jabari's the only one where you could like slot him at the 3 and then still roll out like C Wood and Al P at the 5. Because I do think that Alperen Sengun is going to start next season. There's no way that they pull him off the bench again. Like, the only reason they did it this season is because they had to adjust, they had to move on from Daniel Tice, and now they've shown, like, Al P's shown what he can do. If Al P's benched to start next season, I don't know what I'm going to do, but it's going to be like, I'm going to go like scorched earth, because that can't happen. He needs to be starting next year. And Christian Wood probably needs to be gone.
at the 3 and the 4, it could even be KJ Martin and Paolo Banchero.
It could like any one of those other guys could be like the starting 4. Jabari could be the 3, but that's why I think like Christian Wood is like his days are numbered, and I think a big part of that is like they benched him, right? They benched Seawood and the vets, right? They didn't include Seawood with like the young guys, right? They didn't keep him out there with the other young guys. They said, all right, he's benched. Jayshawn Tate, on the other hand, is still playing, and I think that may be a sign as to where they kind of view him in the role of like how he fits into this rebuild.
Well,
Maybe not necessarily as a starter moving forward, but just a part of the core, if that makes sense.
so I'm going off my memory here, so I could very, very well be wrong, but I think Jayshawn Tate's a restricted free agent at the same time as Kevin Porter Jr., which means if that's correct, then I think they could extend him this offseason, or they're going to offer, or they could, do the same thing with KBJ and basically field any offers that come in. So it's like, how much do they want to spend on Jayshawn Tate? What would Jayshawn Tate command on the market at like 27? I don't know, 26 or 27, whatever he'll be. So that's an interesting conversation as well, because if you're saying they view him as a part of the core, maybe they try to get it done this offseason for like 3 to 5 million or something like that. I don't know what Jayshawn Tate's worth, honestly, but
team friendly deal, probably somewhere around the MLE. I mean, I don't know the shooting percentage is kind of, but I don't know what's his market value, right? But that actually kind of wraps up all of our questions. You want to take us home, or you want me to take us home?
Let's do it as a team.
As a team, all right. I love that. I love that idea. You go first.
Back to South Park, like Jimmy. Come on, just come on. We're gonna take this home together. Never gonna done. So, hey, thanks to everyone for listening. You can catch Jackson Gatlin on Twitter at JT Gatlin. You can catch me on Twitter at Roosh Williams. That's Roosh, rhymes with swoosh, ROOSH, $ with an H, like the city that we're from, ends in Williams. Noble and Roosh Show is my other gig that I do. Already talked about that at the beginning. You can get that wherever you get your podcasts. Locked on Rockets for Jackson Gatlin. Thank you for tuning into the State of the Rockets. We went really long here, actually. This is the longest pod I've done in a minute. So it was fun, though. We appreciate everyone watching. And listen, this is going to become the premier podcast for the Houston Rockets. And I'm really excited to be doing this with Jackson, and I'm excited for everyone that listens. So we appreciate you guys. Jackson, any last words?
Last words are just, thanks for tuning into the show. This was the first ever episode, first ever edition of State of the Rockets. Had a ton of fun chopping it up with my guy Roosh. Whenever we get to talk hoops, it's always a blast. Thanks for supporting the show. If you checked it out, if you made it all the way to the tail end, we went probably a little bit longer than we planned to, but we, fell down some rabbit holes. We got into some interesting discussion points, and that's just kind of what we wanted this thing to be, was just, sit down, talk a little hoop, go wherever the conversation takes us. And that's exactly what I think we accomplished here, as well as answering. We tried to answer as many of those questions as possible. There were a lot to kind of get through.
Answer like 15 questions
on Twitter. Yeah, we went through a big chunk of them, but we appreciate you checking out the show. If you haven't done so yet, please consider dropping us a subscribe on either Apple or Spotify. Hit the little subscribe button. Check us out on the YouTube channel. So search State of the Rockets on YouTube. Go to the YouTube channel, like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. Let us know what you thought about the video in the comments. We'll check out those. We'll respond to as many of them as possible. But yeah, that's going to do it. Follow on Twitter. There we go. That's right. We got the Twitter handle at State of the Rockets. Good call, my guy.
I think it's State of Rockets on Twitter.
It is State of Rockets. That's right. There were too many characters in State of the Rockets, so it is State of Rockets. There we go.
State of Rockets. And hey, until the next time, we appreciate y'all.
Go Rockets.
Or double.